Good afternoon. Welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator of Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call. Today is August 7th, 2024. There's a lot to discuss. Before I get into the call, for those of you that are kind enough to listen regularly, you know that I had a rather brief call last week. We had a death in the family. This call will not be a full call with a Q&A today for the same reason. We have a lot of people coming in and out of town. We have guests staying with us, so there's just a lot happening, and so I've got to address those issues. But I do have a lot of information I do want to share with you today. First, by way of disclaimer, of course, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves, we're sharing with you the information we believe to be most relevant. Of course, our most relevant issue is a window for the reinstitution and evaluation of the Iraqi dinar. And the only way I can explain where we are today is to say that we're in a state of limbo. And I'll try to explain what I mean by that. But for those of us that have been involved with the Iraqi dinar for any length of time, we know there's this vicious cycle, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's for a lot of reasons. It's the Eastern culture. It's the difference between the Shia and the Sunni. It's some of the corrupt officials that are sympathetic to Iran. There's a complex mix of reasons why things seem to be much more complicated than they should be. But I'm going to basically explain to you where I think we are, but I want to qualify everything because remember, the one thing that we have going for us and the nation of Iraq has going for them is Prime Minister Soudani. He seems like a straight shooter who's doing everything he can to get through all of the obstacles that are being placed in his way. And remember, he made a promise, not a statement. He made a promise that the Iraqi citizen would see a new exchange rate this year. And as I've said on previous calls, is that the fiscal year or is it a calendar year? Let's assume the worst-case scenario, it's calendar year, which would be December 31st. Well, for those of us that have had dinar for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, another 3 or 4 months is not a long period of time. So I still have faith in Soudani and his ability to get the job done. But what are the problems? Why is this being prolonged? Why another step back? Well, first is the possibility of a war. Once again, we have the 12th Imam or mullahs of Iran continuing to be provocative and continuing to try to incite Israel. But it's not just the anti-Semitism that moves them. They want Iraq to remain within their sphere of influence. They do not want to see the Iraqi dinar revalue. They do not want to see Iraq as one of the richest countries in the world and negotiating contracts outside of their little orb. The Iranian mullahs want Iraq, once again, to be under their control. But I'm afraid that they're going to lose both the war and their control of Iraq very soon. The next thing is the HCL, which has been around, the hydrocarbon law. It's been around since when? 2007. And we're closer now than we've ever been, but they're still tinkering with the language and trying to deal with some of the more recent global developments. But, of course, there's always the people, once again, that know that the passage of the HCL will lead to the reinstatement of the Iraqi dinar. So, for their own personal political reasons, they're trying to stop it. Now, the U.S. Treasury has finally got involved. Iraq still is maintaining a multi-currency system where the official rate of the dinar versus the street rate is a disparity too wide. We also know that certain banks have been smuggling the USD out primarily to Iran. So as a result, the U.S. Treasury, that in my opinion has been dragging their feet for years, is finally dropping the hammer. They've got Ernst & Young doing an audit. They've determined that I think it was 24 banks have been using the USD in violation of regulations, and they're being sanctioned. And now the U.S. Treasury is taking the unprecedented step of actually going into the CBI and managing affairs of the CBI. This has resulted in the resignation of a Locke. I don't know that a Locke is a corrupt man or even an incompetent man, but I know the Eastern culture enough to know they're prideful people. And so for the U.S. Treasury to step in, I think he felt it necessary that he resign. But basically what the U.S. Treasury is going to do, it's going to not only sanction the banks that are using the USD in violation of what's been established, but it's going to force compliance with the Iraqi banking system to bring it up to speed with international banking practices. So all of this has postponed the momentum, at least short-term momentum we had before the reinstitution of the dinar. But I still go back to the promise that was made by Soudani, that the citizens of Iraq will see a new exchange rate this year. So I still believe that he will get the CBI and the government of Iraq to work together collaboratively. We will see the completion of the HLC. We'll see the completion of the project to delete the zeros, and we will see a new exchange rate, and we will see it this calendar year. So I know we're disappointed. I know we thought this was going to happen within a matter of weeks. Theoretically, it could, but to be realistic about it, calendar year 2024 is the new target. And based on the fact that the U.S. Treasury is on the ground now, means that I think things are finally going to get done. But meanwhile, we got a problem in this country. We have an election coming up, and one party, the Democratic Party, has Harris and Walz as their nominees for president and vice president. Now, what I'm going to say is going to sound a little harsh, but I'm not just some guy sitting on a bar stool at lunchtime. I've worked in D.C. for over a decade. I've worked in the areas of estate planning, asset protection. I was an investment advisor for 40 years. I've been an advisor in my early 20s to a gentleman by the name of Jacob Javits. He was the senator that presided over the Watergate hearings. Howard Baker was a personal friend of mine. He's passed away, but he was the chief of staff for Ronald Reagan. The only reason I mention these things is because I worked in the D.C. area. I know the Potomac two-step. I know who these people are. I know how they think, and I know what they mean when they say things, because they say things in a way that doesn't really mean what their objectives are. I have to go back to Barack Obama, who said that as president, he was going to fundamentally transform America. What he meant by that was he wanted to transition from a constitutional representative republic to a European-style one-party social democracy. This is why they attacked the Supreme Court and the constitutions, particularly the Bill of Rights, at every opportunity. This is why they have an open border to flood this country with people who will presumably vote for them. But I don't think it's going to work. And the reason I don't think it's going to work is because of the Harris-Walz ticket for 2024. These two are Marxist, globalist imbeciles who couldn't run a lemonade stand. And I see no way that the American people at the end of the day, particularly after the Democratic convention, when the Republicans actually start to tell people their record, I see no way they can win the election. As a matter of fact, we know that they've rearranged the deck chairs. They got Biden out of there, and they've got Kamala Harris in there. I think there's a 50-50 chance that they might even try to replace Harris and or Walsh before this is all said and done, because they continually do their internal polls. And if their internal polls show them that Trump could win, they simply cannot allow it for reasons I'm not going to get into. But they've sued the man. They've criminally indicted the man. They've shot the man. And this is absolute desperation. And remember, in September, they're going to have sentencing for Donald Trump over a case that, of course, the Supreme Court will overturn, but all of this was timed for the election. So we will see what happens. My prediction is that he's sentenced to prison. I think they're going to be able to fast-track an appeal to the Supreme Court, and I think the Supreme Court will reverse Judge Marchand's case with the most scathing language we've ever seen. That's just my opinion. That's the way I read the cards. I may be wrong. I may be right. We'll see. But one thing I do know, that there are two things we can do to have peace and prosperity in this country, both as a nation and as individuals with our families. One is to not vote for the Harris-Walsh ticket. And all you have to do is look at their track record to understand that. The second thing is to exercise our Fourth Amendment right to privacy by establishing a family asset protection trust package. That trust package, whether you're a denarian or not, is an indispensable tool to protect you from the kleptocrats in Washington. If you establish this trust, you have preserved your privacy and your anonymity. You will avoid personal IRS scrutiny. You will be able to gift things to individuals through the trust and still maintain control of them. So you gift them the use of items, but you still maintain control of them. The trust will allow you to avoid the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax, which can be as much as 65% of your entire estate. The trust will also allow you to avoid the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, and by segregating assets into sub-trusts, make it virtually impossible for anybody to win any substantial suit against you because you've isolated assets into separate trusts. So, for example, if you're in a car accident, the car is in a trust, but your homes and other assets are in other trusts, which are separate legal entities not involved in any litigation. So this is how the trust package would work. Now, as I said earlier, the dinar most likely will reinstitute and revalue before December of this year. We have an election in November of this year. I think what you need to do, if you have not as yet done so, is get your family asset protection trust package in place. Not because I think that the Democrats will win the election, although we have to acknowledge that's a possibility, but because you need to, in this age and time, need to protect yourself. Now, let me give you one other example. Kamala Harris said that the top marginal tax bracket, if she is elected, she will propose it be between 70 and 80%. The idea that 70 or 80% of your earned income should go to the federal government it's an abomination. But let me give you an example of something that you can do. Here's a scenario. You have currencies. The currencies reinstitute. You go to the bank. You exchange the currencies for USD. Let's say you have 10 million dinar, and let's just say you got $1 for it. You now have $10 million. You have that 10 million go right into your trust bank account. You will establish that trust bank account at that bank at the point of exchange. By doing that, you have never been in constructive receipt of that 10 million. It was in the trust and protected. So now you have 10 million in your trust bank account. And because you do, all of the benefits that I've just detailed, of course, you will now enjoy. But let me give you another example. You have that $10 million in that trust bank account, and you decide that you're going to take $2.5 million of that, and you're going to transfer it to something called a charitable remainder trust. What that means is that $2.5 million will go into a trust, and upon your death, that $2.5 million will then go to the named charities, whether there's one or whether there's five. So let's say you gave half of it to your church and half of it to St. Jude's, hypothetically. But it means something else. It means that during your lifetime, all of the dividends and interest and income generated by that $2.5 million is tax-free to you. So by establishing your family asset protection trust and establishing other things like charitable remainder trusts, you'll preserve your privacy. You'll avoid the possibility of litigation. The IRS isn't going to be able to touch you, and you're going to be able to leave money to charities and to your families, and during your lifetime enjoy tax-free income. So you can get around what they're doing because you're exercising the constitutional rights that they're trying to take from you. Basically, you're giving them a double-barrel middle finger salute, which they most definitely deserve. And all you're saying to them is, just leave us alone. Let us live our lives. Let us make our own decisions. We don't need you running our lives. We need you to leave us alone. And that's basically all I had to say for today. Now, if the information I've provided today is of interest to you, I strongly suggest you contact us to get our initial no-obligation package. It does contain everything you need if you wish to proceed with the establishment of your trust, but you're under no obligation to do so. You can contact us either by phone or email. We'll be happy to send you our trust package. Our email address is trusts with an S, unlimited LLC at gmail.com. That's trusts with an S, unlimited LLC at gmail.com, or our phone service, which is 307-274-4122, 307-274-4122. Before I sign off, I want to thank a number of you that were kind enough to send us our condolences for the death in the family. We're still kind of reeling over that and dealing with it, but we appreciate that very much. Next week, I will be back, and we will have a full call and with a Q&A and all of that, and we'll have gotten a lot of this stuff behind us, this personal stuff. But again, thanks so much for listening to the call, and have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye now.